we actually give the roadmap to these two agencies. And it's much better than current law, where Chairman Gensler loses in federal court. He doesn't have a clear roadmap on what's a security, what's a commodity. He encourages people to come in and register, and then he never returns their phone call.
The Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, also known as FIT21, is set to be voted on in the House later today. FIT21 would establish a clear framework for digital assets in the United States, identifying where and how each token and exchange might be regulated. The Republican bill has garnered bipartisan support, and several Democrats are pushing their colleagues to vote yes. Joining us now is Congressman French Hill, who heads the crypto subcommittee. Congressman, welcome to First Mover.
You bet. Jen, it's great to be back with you.
It's great to have you here again. Now, a big day. Everyone is waiting for this vote that's scheduled for later this afternoon. I want to get into your head a little bit. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's a historic day because it's the first time that our nation's come together and had a comprehensive bill that supports Web3, blockchain development, and the future of the internet and the future of how we can use blockchain for removing costs, increasing compliance, reducing fraud, creating innovation, and make sure that America stays at the top of the global technology race. So it's a historic day, and I'm excited about it. And the work that's been done by both Democrats and Republicans in the administration and on Capitol Hill, I think you'll see in a very bipartisan vote later this afternoon, which in my view gives us strength going over to the United States Senate and finding their concurrence and also their best ideas for this space as well.
Give me a little bit of insight here. What have the conversations been like with the Democrats? Has it been smooth sailing up until now? What's the back and forth been like?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I see a generational issue here where younger Democrats catch on to what's going on here. They recognize that the existing Securities and Exchange Commission rules are inadequate for dealing with bringing innovation to the market that includes tokens and clearly delineating what's a security, and it should be regulated like a security, but what is a decentralized functioning blockchain that those tokens might well much better be regulated and exchanged in a commodity environment. So this bill sets out that roadmap, creates that framework. What's a security is treated as a security. What's a commodity is treated as a commodity. And we create clear definitions for how to do that. Who's a dealer? Who's an exchange? How to custody digital assets. This will increase money coming to the U.S., increase innovation, and I think give us the best regulatory framework for digital technology going forward, and it will give investors more clarity, consumers more clarity. And if we combine this, Jen, with a privacy bill, which I also think we need to have Congress pass, and a payment stablecoin bill, we will have gone a long way to crafting the right federal regulatory environment for moving from an analog services future to a digital future.
Any thoughts, ideas on how many Democrats might support the bill in the vote later on today?
Well, last week we got a bit of a glimpse on this. We had 21 Democrats support Republicans in rejecting the SEC-driven staff accounting bulletin on custody, which was prejudiced against digital assets. It was very poorly done. And then over in the Senate, there were 60 votes with that Republican position in the Senate last week, including Chuck Schumer, the majority leader. So I believe that we've done a good job making this a bipartisan issue. And I think we'll get more than 21 Democrats this week on FIT21. Here's some reasons why. This bill is responsive to President Biden's own executive order to say that there are regulatory gaps in the regulatory framework for digital assets and that Congress should be the one to close those gaps. Secondly, we've had Richie Torres and some of his colleagues, Wiley Nickel of North Carolina, Jim Himes of Connecticut, talk to their fellow Democratic caucus members saying this is a good bill. It's a bipartisan bill. And finally, President Biden himself this morning issued the statement of administration position on FIT21, and he did not. He said affirmatively he will not veto this bill. That
Well,
there's some things that he would do differently, and he hoped to work with the Senate on those. But that was very encouraging, and I think that will be a green light for innovation supporting, capital markets supporting Democrats to vote with Republicans this afternoon.
it's interesting you bring that up. I know that last week the Senate recently voted to kill the SEC's crypto accounting policy. We were just talking about that. And while President Joe Biden said that he won't veto this, he vowed to veto that decision. Do you think that that will happen?
Such an interesting point. I mean, they are not consistent.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
They're not consistent. And, you know, a Congressional Review Act action by the Republicans against a rule made by a Democratic administration does pit it as a political exercise. But I would recommend to the president that he's making the right decision not to veto FIT21, to work with Republicans and Democrats to have a regulatory framework for digital assets. And in doing so, we correct the errors in the Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 on crypto custody. So I would encourage the president to not veto the Congressional Review Act, agree to work with Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate that there's a better approach. Gary Gensler himself has said he did not consult with the other regulatory bodies. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, Jay Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, said they were not consulted on the Staff Accounting Bulletin. That's one reason why so many Democrats voted with Republicans on that. It was ill-conceived, and it doesn't even take into account that it's the bank supervisors that principally oversee custody rules, not the SEC.
I'm glad you brought up SEC Chair Gary Gensler, because today he said that FIT21 would create new regulatory gaps, undermine decades of precedent regarding the oversight of investment contracts, putting investors in capital markets at immeasurable risk. How would you respond to him ahead of the vote later this afternoon?
Yeah. So I reject his argument that FIT21 opens a new loophole. He's arguing that someone could now have a non-digital asset company, let's say Apple, and that Apple could issue tokenized shares and escape all the registration requirements around the SEC, for example. That's just not true. It's not true in the definition section of FIT21, and it's not true in the text of FIT21. And I think we can demonstrate that beyond a shadow of doubt with securities lawyers talking to securities lawyers, that this assertion he's making is not based in fact.
I mean, if it's not based in fact, why do you think he's out there saying it? Why do you think he's being so public about it? Is it that he wants to continue leading the SEC the way it's being led, with a lot of regulation by enforcement? What do you think is motivating him to make these comments if they're not true?
Well, I can't explain it because this bill is very clear. It gives authority to the SEC and the CFTC to jointly write the rules around crypto. Now, think about that. We are directing them to write the rules, to give transparency. What's a digital asset? What's a commodity? What's a security? Who can be a dealer? How do you become a broker? How do you register as an exchange? And how do you do custody? We actually give the roadmap to these two agencies. And it's much better than current law, where Chairman Gensler loses in federal court. He doesn't have a clear roadmap on what's a security, what's a commodity. He encourages people to come in and register, and then he never returns their phone call. So we give a roadmap for him on that subject. So I cannot explain why he's taken the position that he had. I think he's isolated from other regulatory leaders like Chairman Benham, the Democratic appointed chairman of the Commodities Future Trading Commission. He completely supports FIT21. He and his staff have been excellent interlocutors and providers of technical assistance on our bill. And the SEC staff themselves have provided technical assistance in drafting FIT21. So we feel very confident in the direction that we're taking. We're disappointed that Chairman Gensler doesn't see that this is better than current law and gives him the tools, ability, and a process that can allow him to be a better a better regulator and a better supervisor in this space.
Congressman, if the bill does pass, do you think that the CFTC has the resources it needs to properly co-oversee the space with the SEC?
Well, Chairman Benham gave specific recommendations to the House Agriculture Committee, and he's testified in our joint hearing about the funding that he needs, and this bill includes the proper funding for the CFTC to stand up the authorities that they need to deal with digital commodities, because it is a new area for them outside the futures market on Bitcoin. They will now have the spot market authority on Bitcoin, for example, and they'll have these exchanges that they need to oversee and supervise as well.
Now, I got to ask you, we are in an election year. It's what we are talking about. We're ramping up for. And crypto is seemingly becoming an issue that folks are paying more and more attention to. Do you think that there are really single issue voters in this election?
You know, I've never seen single issue voters over my few years in elected office that really drive the narrative and turn the table on an election. But I think it's right to say that the Republicans in this interest are the supporters of innovation of capital markets, capital market innovation, internet innovation, the future of technology. But I don't want to make that a partisan statement, because I want a large vote today where Democrats and Republicans come together, and that we stand, as we did back in the 1990s, for America being a leader in internet technology. Now it's time to do the same thing when it comes to Web3, blockchain use, and tokenization. This will bring many benefits to consumers across our society, both in the public sector and the private sector.
And I have to ask you, just with all of the excitement in the industry yesterday with the sudden movement on the spot Ether ETFs, do you think we're going to see an approval of this for the spot Ether ETF as soon as tomorrow?
Well, I know there's a deadline here in May for the commission to act, and I would hope after the court cases in and around Bitcoin, the response of consumers and of companies and providers of the Bitcoin ETP product, that they would step forward and do this in the right way. I think it's justified, and I think their experience, both their litigation experience as well as their analytical performance experience in approving those ETPs for Bitcoin, would hopefully get them to yes. So we look forward to hearing a positive response from the commission. They'll have to explain themselves what the difference is if they're not able to approve these products.
Well, that's exactly it. There was some speculation, some chatter by analysts yesterday that maybe there was a sudden change in the SEC's heart due to political pressures. Do you think that that could be the case?
Well, I'm sure they work hard at the commission to follow the law, follow their supervisory practice, and follow the facts when they approve any product for availability to the consumer. It took a long time to get these Bitcoin ETP products approved. They've said for years that the futures market and the cash market were not correlated, and there was a real discrepancy there. Commissioner Peirce, SEC Commissioner Peirce, said that, well, that's just not true. And ultimately, it took a court to intervene to get them to head in the right direction. And then suddenly, when they announced that they approved it, they did find that the futures market and the cash market were in sync. So perhaps they'll come to the same conclusion for this round.
All right. And Congressman Hill, just before I let you go, can we expect a Hill chairmanship at the House Financial Services Committee from you?
Well, I've certainly started talking to my colleagues about my interest and passion for serving as the next Republican leader of the House Financial Services Committee. You know, I've devoted my whole life to economics and financial policy, starting out as a young banker out of college, and then a staffer for the Senate Banking Committee during the 1980s, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Bush 41, a coordinator of all White House economic policy for Bush 41, and then since the 90s, an entrepreneur, starting businesses, being a broker-dealer CEO, being a bank CEO. So it would be an honor of a lifetime if my colleagues thought I should be the right person to take that leadership position. But we'll be talking about it the rest of the year.